With the NFL Scouting Combine being this week, I felt like it was appropriate to release my latest NFL mock draft. And I am going to try to keep this to under 15 minutes. I'm not going to go in depth on every single one of the picks. I will go a little more in depth on the ones that stick out to me. But if there is a pick that you would like me to defend, please leave it in the comments section. I will give you a response. Without further ado, let's get to my second NFL mock draft of the mock draft season. And there is no changes at the top of my mock draft. Pick one, I have the Titans going with Cam Ward, quarterback out of Miami. Pick two, the Browns. I had them going with Abdul Carter in the first mock draft because I was not sure if I could trust the Browns to go with what I felt like was a smart pick in Travis Hunter. But in this mock draft, I do. I have them going with Travis Hunter out of Colorado, the two-way sensation playing wide receiver and corner. But the draft websites, they have him listed as a corner, but I anticipate that he is going to play both receiver and corner in the league. Pick number three, the Giants. I'm going with Shedeur Sanders, quarterback out of Colorado. And this was the same pick I had in my 1.0, as I think that nothing changes. There was rumors circulating that Shedeur Sanders, he is the top quarterback in the Giants' mind. Pick number four. Now, this could be a controversial pick to some, as last mock draft I expressed that the Patriots' big need was offensive line to build protection for Drake May. But I've been with Abdul Carter, edge rusher out of Penn State. And the reason why I have Abdul Carter and not Will Campbell or Kelvin Banks Jr. or Josh Simmons is because I feel like it's not a bad idea to go best player available at this point. A lot of the time when it comes to the draft, you draft talent and then later on you trade for needs. Or take care of needs in free agency, address talent in the draft. Pick number five, I have the Jaguars going with Mason Graham, defensive tackle out of Michigan. And this is probably not likely going to be the pick for the Jaguars, as I did have them going with Travis Hunter in the last mock draft because he was still on the board at that time. But listening to Liam Cohen's presser the other day saying that the passing game is going to go through Brian Thomas Jr., I don't know if it's an indication that they would pass on a wide receiver such as Tetaroa McMillan or even Luther Burden. Pick number six, I have the Raiders going with Tetaroa McMillan, wide receiver, Arizona. And I did have them go with Ashton Jeanty last time because I felt like that is something that the Raiders, I feel like it'd be in their best interest to do so, to kind of get some respect back, to get more relevant, as they just saw their three division rivals all make the playoffs this past season. Pick number seven, I had the Jets going with Will Campbell, offensive tackle out of LSU. The Jets, they simply just need to build their offensive line. Pick number eight, the Panthers go with Will Johnson, cornerback out of Michigan. And this may be too high on the draft boards for a lot of people, as I have not seen many mock drafts with Will Johnson being in the top 10. But I feel like him at number 8 to the Panthers, I do think it's appropriate, given that they really have interest in wanting to improve the defense. And I do think that he would be a good complement for J.C. Horn, even though it may sound hypocritical where I just said a while back to draft talent and address needs later on in the offseason and free agency. But I just think the pairing would be too good for the Panthers to pass up. Pick number 9, the Saints. I have them going with Tyler Warren, tight end out of Penn State. And have been reports that the Saints are going to release Taysom Hill. And as soon as I read that, Tyler Warren to the Saints at pick 9, it just really screamed that that's going to come to fruition, as seeing Tyler Warren on film being Mr. Versatility just like Taysom Hill, I feel like it would be foolish if the Saints release Taysom Hill. I get that they have cap space issues at this point. I think they have the worst cap space in the league for this offseason. But I feel like that Tyler Warren has that potential of being Taysom Hill 2.0. Pick 10, the Bears go with Kelvin Banks Jr., offensive tackle out of Texas. This was the same pick I had last time. The Bears, they need to address their offensive line. Caleb Williams was the most sacked quarterback in the league last season. Or I probably should have said this season. Pick 11, the 49ers, they improve their offensive line as well. They follow suit. They draft Josh Simmons, offensive tackle of Ohio State. And I almost had the 49ers going wide receiver. Given the fact that Deebo Samuel is requesting a trade, and reportedly contract extension negotiations are going on with Brock Purdy right now, and you want to give him all the talent around him to make that contract worthwhile, but I think they draft Josh Simmons as a replacement for Trent Williams. Pick number 12, the Cowboys go with Ashton Jeanty, running back, Boise State. And honestly, I really didn't want to make that kind of pick because it feels like every mock draft I've seen, at least 90% of mock drafts I've seen, have Ashton Jeanty to the Cowboys. Because it just feels like the obvious fit for Ashton Jeanty. He has that desire to be drafted by the Cowboys. And even though it isn't really me being any different than anybody else, I feel like we all see that it'd be a good fit for Ashton Jeanty. Pick 13, the Dolphins go with Tyler Booker, offensive guard out of Alabama. Simply addressing the offensive line to protect Tua long term, given his history with concussions. Pick 14, the Colts go with Malachi Starks, safety out of Georgia. Pick 15, the Falcons go with James Pierce Jr., edge rusher, Tennessee. The Falcons, they have addressed offense in the last few years. It's time for them to go with the defense. There is great edge rushers to choose from. James Pierce Jr., Michael Williams, Nick Scorton, Shamar Stewart, Jack Sawyer, Mike Green, who I think is going to stick out to a lot of people. And I just realized I skipped over Malachi Starks, pick 14 to the Colts. I would say that the Colts, they would address their defensive needs at this point in the draft. And Malachi Starks, he is the best player on the board, in my opinion, maybe second best at the very least, behind Michael Williams. Pick 16, the Cardinals go with Michael Williams, edge rusher to Georgia. They follow suit with the Falcons and draft an edge rusher. I do think Jonathan Gannon is going into this season on the hot seat, and the Cardinals, they address their defense. Pick 17, the Bengals, they go with Siobhan Revel, cornerback out of East Carolina. And I feel like Siobhan Revel is going to be the Quinyon Mitchell in this draft. As throughout the whole process, it was, okay, Quinyon Mitchell, he should be taken pretty early in the draft, probably a top 10 to 15 pick, but then he falls on draft night. Then he ends up being a steal, as we saw with the Eagles this past NFL draft. With pick 18, the Seahawks, they go with Aaronette Ezeri, offensive tackle out of Minnesota. The Seahawks, they are one of those teams that on occasion they will draft players that nobody necessarily suspects, as I feel like Aaronette Ezeri is one of those guys that probably has a second round grade that will find themselves in that first round. Pick number 19, the Buccaneers, they select Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver of Ohio State. And my hot take for Emeka Egbuka is I feel like he should be the top receiver in this draft class. And the reason why I say that, Ohio State wide receivers, they are, in my opinion, the safest picks in NFL drafts. Because I can't think at the top of my head an Ohio State wide receiver that has not panned out in the NFL. And I think Emeka Egbuka, he is going to be no different. Pick number 20, the Broncos, they select Luther Burden III, wide receiver out of Missouri. Bo Nix gets another pass catcher for the Broncos offense. As Luther Burden III, he is arguably the best player on the board at this point in the draft. Pick number 21, the Steelers, they select Benjamin Morrison, cornerback out of Notre Dame. The weakness for the Steelers last season, or again, I should say this season, was the secondary. They were 25th in the NFL in pass defense. Pick 22, the Chargers. I will be surprised on draft night if the Chargers do not draft an offensive player, whether it be a tight end or a wide receiver. I'll be surprised if the pick is neither of those. I have to go with Colston Loveland, tight end out of Michigan. Will Dissly, he did have some big moments this season, but when it mattered, Will Dissly did not rise up to the occasion. Plus, Jim Harbaugh gets another one of his Michigan men who he coached to a national championship. Pick 23, the Packers go with Jack Sawyer, edge rusher out of Ohio State. And I honestly would not be surprised if Jack Sawyer, if he fell to the second round. But the Packers, they get a true leader, someone with a championship pedigree, just coming off of a national championship with Ohio State. Pick number 24, the Vikings go with Jahdae Barron out of Texas. Now, some sites have him as a corner, some have him as a safety. The Vikings, they were 28th in pass defense this season. Pick number 25, the Texans, they go with someone who I think is going to be a great fit or would be a great fit. Matthew Golden, wide receiver out of Texas. Stephon Diggs is not getting any younger. Tank Dell is expected to be out for the entire season in 2025. Pick 26, the Rams go with Armand Membou, offensive tackle, Missouri. Part of the downfall for the Rams was their offensive line. Armand Membou, he could be a steal at this point in the draft, but he also may not. It really depends on how things play out from now until draft night, as we're still about 2 months away. But the Rams, they addressed their offensive line. Pick 27, the Ravens select Alec Iomanner, wide receiver out of Stanford. And Iomanner's breakout game where he showed he has a lot of potential at the next level was the Colorado game where they were down 29-0. And he was ultimately the difference maker in that game. Pick 28, the Lions, I think that it would be a surprise if they don't take either of the Texas A&M edge rushers, Nick Scorton or Shamar Stewart. I had them going with Shamar Stewart originally, and that is what's on my paper right now. But before I recorded this, I saw some of Nick Scorton's combine interview, and he talked about players that have stuck out to him. And one of the players he said was Aiden Hutchinson. And I think with that, I do think they go with Nick Scorton, edge rusher out of Texas A&M. Pick number 29, the Commanders go with Mike Green, edge rusher out of Marshall. I expressed last time that Mike Green, I think, is going to be someone who is going to stick out in these next 2 months leading into the draft. I could see Mike Green going as high as the top 15. I think he would be a top 15 pick if he went to a Power 4 school and not Marshall. Because we see this all the time. We see prospects that we think could go in the top 15, but they don't, simply because they don't go to one of the power schools. And I think Mike Green is another case of that. Pick number 30, the Bills go with Azariah Thomas, cornerback out of Florida State. The Bills were 24th in pass defense this season. And Azariah Thomas, I think, this could be a steal at this point. I actually think it would, because I think he could potentially be a top 20 pick, depending on how things play out. Pick 31, the Chiefs go with Wyatt Millam, offensive guard out of West Virginia. And we saw the Chiefs' offensive line really crumble in the Super Bowl. And with that, I think it's a no-brainer. The Chiefs, they address their offensive line here. And with the 32nd pick, the Eagles, they go with Jalen Walker, linebacker of Georgia, for multiple reasons. One, because he's the best player on the board right now, at least in my opinion. And two, we know the Eagles, they love to draft their Georgia Bulldogs. And that will do it for my NFL Mock Draft 2.0 for the 2025 NFL Mock Draft season. Thank you for tuning in. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. Enjoy the NFL Combine this week for those of you that do like to watch that. I will most likely make some NFL Combine content. It will most likely be in YouTube Shorts. Please be on the lookout for that, as I'm looking forward to the Scouting Combine this week as we're getting closer to the NFL Draft.